Everyone knows the visual wonders most modern video games bring. They are not just entertainment anymore. In many cases, they are just works of art. And today, we take it for granted that plugging your console into a TV is the most normal thing in the world. But there was a time where no one, literally no one, thought a television could be used to play video games. Before PlayStation, before Nintendo, even before Atari, some had to imagine, for the first time, something completely absurd for its era. What if we could play using the TV at home? That question gave birth to the first home console in history, and its name was Magnavox Odyssey. When we talk about the origin of consoles, we usually think about programmers, game studios, or entertainment companies. But what's curious is that the story doesn't start there. It doesn't start with a game company, neither does in a garage full of teenagers. And it doesn't even start with the idea of fun. It starts with an engineer who wasn't even trying to create video games. Ralph Baer was an electronics engineer, a technical, methodical, obsessive kind of person. He was born in Germany in the 1920s and had to flee the country with his family due to the rise of the Nazism. Already in the States, Baer started his engineer career and ended up working for companies tied to military electronics and communication systems. Nothing related to leisure and nothing related to entertainment. Now, to understand his idea, you need to understand the world back in the 1950s and 60s. Television was almost a sacred object. TV wasn't interactive. You didn't touch it, you didn't question it. It was a box that broadcast signals. And that was it. No one thought about playing, no one thought about participating. In 1966, while working on a completely different project, Baer stops and writes a personal note. A note that basically said, what if we could make games using a television? He wasn't talking about consoles, he wasn't talking about video games. He was talking about interaction. The problem was that his idea had nowhere to exist. There was no market, there was no audience, and there was actually no language to explain it. Baer didn't think, I'm going to change the world. He thought, this is interesting, but no one is going to take me seriously. And yet, he kept going. Instead of pitching it as a product, Baer began treating the idea as a personal experiment. The small circuits, simple signals, dots moving on screen. It wasn't fun, it wasn't even pretty, but it worked. And when something works, you cannot just leave it behind. Without realizing it, Baer had crossed the line. He had proven that the television could respond to the user. And that small detail was going to change everything. Up to this point, all of this was just an idea into Baer's mind, an intuition, what if, but ideas don't change anything unless they become something real. So Baer did the only thing he knew how to do. He started building. There's one important thing to understand. In the 1960s, microprocessors as we know them today didn't exist. There was no software, there was no coding, there wasn't even memory. Everything was done with analog circuits. That means every movement on screen had to be physically generated with electrical signals. Moving a dot to the left wasn't an instruction, it was an engineering problem. After several failed prototypes, Baer and his team arrived to something far more stable, a simple brown box connected to a television. It didn't even have a commercial name, and it wasn't meant to be sold. That's why today we simply know it as the brown box. The box generated basic shapes, lines, dots, rectangles, and most importantly, the user could control them. When we say the brown box had games, we had to put that in a lot of quotation marks. There were no graphics as we understand them today, and so many of their games depended on the player's imagination. Plastic overlays were placed on the TV screen, they simulated cards, mazes, environments. The console did the bare minimum. Move the dots. The brown box wasn't fun in the modern sense, but it proved something crucial, that the television could respond to the user, that it wasn't just a passive medium. And once you experience that, there's no going back. The problem was that Baer wasn't working on a video game company. He was working at a company that didn't even know what to do with this. He had an invention, but no place for it in the world. And that's where Magnavox came in picture. This is where the main conflict of the story appears. Baer had the technology, but no one believed it could be sold. For the industry at the time, television was a sacred object. You watched it, but you didn't touch it. After many rejections, one company decided to take a risk, Magnavox. Not because they understood the future of video games, but because they were looking for something different to help sell televisions. With the deal in place in 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey officially launches. It had several games, tennis, ping pong, chase games, all extremely basic. But here's the key detail most people don't know. The console didn't generate sound, it didn't have a processor, it didn't even have memory. Everything worked only using the analog circuits I mentioned before. And at this point the question was inevitable. Was the Magnavox Odyssey a failure or was it a success? Because if we only look at the numbers, the answer seems clear. It didn't sell millions. It didn't become an immediate cultural phenomenon. And before long, it disappeared from the market. But that's only one way to look at history. The Odyssey had several problems, and none of them were related to the idea itself. The first was how it was sold. Magnavox marketed it as an accessory exclusive for their televisions. Many people believed that if you didn't own a Magnavox TV, the console wouldn't work, and that was far from the truth. But the damage was already done. The other major problem is a little bit harder to explain. The Odyssey was too far ahead of its time. I already have a video about futuristic inventions if you want to watch it after this one. It wasn't plug and play like today. It had to be explained, it had to be imagined, it had to be learned. And in 1972, the audience wasn't ready for that. But here's where things get interesting. Even if the Odyssey wasn't a massive success, it was seen by the right people. In 1972, an engineer named Nolan Bushnell saw a demonstration of the Odyssey's tennis game, and he understood something that almost no one else did. This is huge. That's where Pong was born. Pong wouldn't have existed without the Odyssey, and Atari wouldn't have been Atari without Pong. In fact, Magnavox sued Atari, and that ended in court. Because the original idea was patented, Baer had protected his invention. But we'll talk about that in another video. And this is where the story changed perspective. What looked like a failure was in fact the first step of an entire industry. The Odyssey didn't come to dominate the market. It came to prove the market could exist. And no, this console wasn't remembered for its graphics or for its games. It was remembered because it opened a door. After it, no one could say that playing at home was impossible anymore. And the rest is history. The next video of this series, we're going to talk about how this door was kicked wide open, and how Atari turned an experimental idea into a mass phenomenon. And that's where the console wars truly begin. So yeah, this is the start of a video series I'll be releasing little by little, where we will explore the history of individual consoles, the battles we know between Atari, Sega, and Nintendo, and later Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, all the way to this day. If you're enjoying the series and want to see more, please like and subscribe, and feel free to comment anything you want, because we are just getting started. So see you in 2 weeks. Bye!